Before we get started, I wanted to give a special shout out to the show's sponsor, Rebecca Jonesy, author of the Mabs Doll series, where the Fae know that everyone is unique and all love is valid. Rebecca is a great ally and a good friend. Thank you so much for helping to make this show possible. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Unafraid, the podcast sharing stories from the queer community. I'm Jay, and I'm going to be your host today. And currently, it is my cat is here to say hello as well. Currently, it is May 2020. We are still in the grips of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so most of the world is on lockdown, and most of the world is very confused about everything that's going on. Thankfully for content creators and podcasters, we are quite used to social distancing and isolation. And so we're still able to produce some content for you. And I have a wonderful guest today, but I am going to let them introduce themselves.
All right. Hi, my name is Laur. I use they, them pronouns. I'm 27. I am a trans person. I'm non-binary. That's my basics when it comes to my identity. I live in Toronto. I moved here in September, so pretty fresh to North America and to Canada, and originally from Europe, mostly Germany and Hungary. And yeah.
Awesome. And wow, you explained your gender identity way better than I do, because I still I feel like I still have to try to over explain myself. Well, see, I'm genderqueer, and that means this and this, and I think it means this, and I don't really know this, and it sometimes is a huge mess. So are you you're in Canada,
Mhm.
and you guys are still in lockdown right now, correct?
Yes, things are lifting a bit here now, I
Okay.
think. Honestly, my life hasn't changed much. I didn't go out a lot before. I worked from home before, and I still do that. So um, I think our lives is going to be pretty similar for the next couple of months, even if it opens up a bit.
Okay. What kind of work do you do?
Um, after we moved here, I tried to find a job and I applied for a bunch of positions, but the job market is kind of tough in Toronto, especially when you just moved here and you don't have any references, and probably being trans doesn't help. Um, and so I am currently running a online community. It's called the Trans Peer Network. It's mostly based on a Discord server for now, but I'm working on expanding that. We have several times a week, we have video hangouts where you can just meet with other trans and non-binary people and spend time together. We have a lot of channels for different conversations about anything trans related and also everything else. There's just meant to be a safe space online, and that's basically what I do right now, full time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you're meeting 3 times a week now?
The video hangouts happen 3 times a week. That's Monday and Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern and Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And they always go for 6 to 9 hours. So
Oh
we
my
try to
gosh.
cover as much time as possible. I only host 2 of those at this point. I found myself some co-hosts who facilitate some of the other. The Monday one is not mine anymore. So that yesterday happened without me. And then we have different other things. We have movie nights, we have game nights either on Switch or on Discord with Jackbox and stuff like that. So almost
Okay.
every night something's happening at this point.
That's awesome. Well, and you said that it's a safe space for queer people. And um, when we're talking about online spaces, what exactly does that mean? Is that something that's kind of a necessary and important thing right now, that we have safe spaces for queer people?
um, I think there's never going to be any space that's like 100% safe, right? Like that's an ideal to strive towards, but not something you can ever achieve. For us, what it means is that we kind of try to look at who gets access to the server. So it's not an open server. You need to get an invite sent to you. And we try to make sure that at least everybody who comes is trans or questioning or in any way related to that. So like one of the big advantages versus Twitter is you do not get messages from chasers. You don't have TERFs. You don't have all of those more aggressive people that make our lives on the internet more difficult. And
Well, and so for people who may watch this, who may not be part of the queer community or understand the language, because I'm still learning all the language. Chasers are people who are chasing after queer women because they're fetishizing them, or what is a chaser exactly?
yeah, it's people who fetishize pre or non-op trans women, so women
Okay.
with penises, and that's the focus of their fetish very much, most of the
Okay.
time at least.
Okay. So these are guys trying to get their rocks off, talking to trans women, maybe.
Most of the
Something
time,
like,
yes.
okay, all right.
um,
So we don't want those. And then TERFs, I do know what this means, but could you explain this to us?
okay, the acronym comes from trans exclusionary radical feminist, and it's a term that originally was coined by the people who identified with it. Since then, they've moved on to something nicer. The way that alt-right is the new nice term for what otherwise would have called maybe some more poignant terms. And
Nazis?
for example, yes,
Yeah.
fascists.
Yeah, we've got lots of those down in here in America, unfortunately.
Oh, we have plenty up here. Don't worry. But basically, the idea is that it's people who use radical feminism as an excuse to be trans exclusionary, to deny trans people access to the public as themselves. Um, and that's just things that, especially once you become more vocal about being trans or more vocal as a trans person, the amount of people who come from these sides and engage with you become more and more prominent, or like more and more exhausting. And that can be very scary.
Well, I imagine so. And as someone who doesn't present as female, and I don't have any kind of feminine aesthetic to me, I'm not approached by anyone who is a chaser. And because I have such a small online presence, I don't really have to interact with TERFs or anyone else like that. But there are people out there like yourself and some other friends that I have on Twitter that may have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 followers, and all
Mhm.
day it seems like they're they're battling and battling and battling.
Yeah,
And so it's nice that the Trans Peer Network, you can filter that out and keep that
yeah,
out.
we
Um,
try. I mean, as much as we can. I'm always waiting for the day when somebody gets access who shouldn't have, because it's going to
how do you
happen.
how do you think it's gonna go down? What do you think will happen? Because I can't imagine somebody just popping up and just starting to talk shit
No.
on your network.
So what we do is we have different kinds of tiers of who is there. Which what that means is that when you first join, you have access to a certain amount of channels, but not to the more private ones, not to the ones where people might post about their medical information or about just more personal things, I guess. And so what we do is we have people have to be active for a certain amount of time and have to talk on the server for a certain amount of time before they get automatically granted access to the rest of the server. And that kind of means that we have a chance to get to know people, and we have a chance for people to show who they really are before they have access to those.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
I have a team of admins and moderators that are very active on the server and that kind of try to keep an eye on every conversation that's happening, which is getting extremely difficult since we've moved. I think we've moved past 450 members at this point.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's growing a lot, and we have a lot of new people coming every day. And yeah, so we have a bunch of people who kind of try to moderate that and keep an eye on what's going on and how people are behaving, and making sure that people follow the rules that we set in place to keep everybody safe and
Okay.
comfortable.
That's awesome. Do you, what what is the climate like, for with the Trans Peer Network? Because I know that on Twitter there seems to be certain days or weeks where I'll get on and everything I see is just kind of crap, and it's kind of a downer. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to Facebook for a couple weeks here and try it again later. Is the Trans Peer Network more of a place of encouragement, or is it kind of anything goes, or?
Um, technically anything within reason goes, I would say. Like, you can have disagreements and you can have differences in opinion. But since we are able to moderate that ourselves, we can make sure that those are discussed in a respectful way and in a understanding way. And what we also do is we kind of try to compartmentalize certain topics to certain channels. And so we have very heated discussions about politics, but those happen in a channel for politics. And if you don't feel like having a fight over which flavor of communism is yours, you don't have to go there, and you don't have to deal with any of that.
What's your flavor? I would have to go with like a cookie dough. Oh, wait. Maybe what's the crumbled up Oreo one?
Oh yes, I like that one.
Yeah, I like that one too. That's a good one.
I'm very partial to pistachio, to be honest. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm allergic to all nuts, so I have to stay away from all of that good
Damn,
stuff.
I'm sorry.
I know. Can you imagine a life where you couldn't eat Reese's Pieces?
Since I've never lived in the US, yes, very much. But
is that just a US thing?
Yeah.
Oh
they
my
might have them
God.
here. I think they have them here in Canada, but not in Europe. At least
Oh my
not in
gosh.
like everybody's supermarkets.
I may have to ship you a bag of Reese's Pieces because they're amazing.
I'm not into sweets. I don't really like sweets, so it's okay.
All right. Okay. All right. That's cool.
But yeah, so it's very much, we have a pretty comprehensive set of rules that are very general, but try to explain the kind of conversation we're going for, where it's about respecting everybody's identities and respecting their lived experiences and engaging in a kind and mindful manner with each other, trying to make things better and not worse. And I think what also helps is just because even if it's a big group, it's still a closed environment. And so you don't have, like, people kind of know each other, and you don't have complete strangers butting into conversations like on Twitter, where I can have a conversation with another trans activist in Ontario, and then somebody in Australia is like, I have opinions. And then they just show up and start talking. And that's something that is less of an issue on Discord.
Okay. This is going to sound so goofy. I don't know how to get around to the point that I'm trying to say, so I'll just stumble through it like I usually do. Very recently, a good friend of mine, Amanda Jeté Knox, who's also a Canadian and a trans rights activist or advocate, kind of took a leave of absence from Twitter because there was a huge blow up, and she started receiving just a ton of hate, and people kind of just kept piling on board like we do online. And I'm wondering if in the space that you created, do things like that happen, or are people more respectful than, because Twitter's kind of like the Wild West. I mean, it's crazy out there. It's scary, and half the time, I follow a lot of queer people on Twitter, but I only chat with a handful of them because I'm terrified that if I say the wrong thing to the wrong person, all of a sudden people will jump on me. And it's like, I sometimes don't know what the wrong thing is. And it is very intimidating on Twitter. So what is the environment like inside your community? Is it a little bit gentler, or?
It is. First of all, I feel like so far, at least, it has been just based on the people who come and who are interested in being part of this community. We also make sure that it stays that way. So when we have people who express their opinion in a very forceful manner, or maybe in a hurtful manner, or in a manner that's not productive, we kind of jump in and we're like, hey, try to de-escalate. So we have a couple of people on there who are amazing at de-escalating conflict and who are very good at slowing everybody down. We also have the tools for that. We can literally just slow down a channel where you can only post one message every 2 minutes. And that means that people can't attack each other the same way, but they have to actually think about what they want to do with their one message that they get every 2 minutes. And so we have tools and have a way to kind of monitor those things that is much closer than on Twitter. And it's not about what your opinion is. Like, we're not policing, this is the right way to think about this and this is the wrong way. We just try to make sure that people don't hurt each other and that people engage in a more respectful manner. than it happens on Twitter.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good. I think that was what I was trying to say. It just seems like some of these environments, um, even within the queer community or the trans community on Twitter, can be just a little bit harsh. Um, and when I first started to explore who I am, which was not that long ago, and I reached out to several people. I reached out to a woman named Kiri, who I know that you know.
Mhm.
And I reached out to you, and it was because there was a little pinned post, I think, that said, my DMs are open if you ever had questions. So I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna bite the bullet. I'm actually gonna ask somebody some questions. And the way that you spoke with me and the way Kiri also spoke with me just made me feel so much more welcome. And it made me feel like I could ask questions and I could explore. And sometimes just Googling something doesn't it's not as personal,
Yeah.
as when you talk to someone who's been there. So I really appreciate that. And what do you think is your goal with the trans peer network? Because you said it was a safe space, and that might be the answer right there, to create a safe space. But is there something else that you're trying to do with this platform?
Um, for now, it's mostly giving a space that where you can have community online, right? Like, I got really lucky in a sense because I set this whole thing up 2 months before lockdown started, and so by the time everybody else was confined to their homes, I had everything set up and I was already doing it, and I had some experience with it, and that gave us a huge boost in numbers and in activity. And that's when I went from once a week to 3 times a week, just because there were so many people who suddenly wanted to spend time online because they couldn't go to their local support group. They didn't really have access to their friends in person anymore. And so I think the week that most of the US went into lockdown, we went from maybe sometimes having a couple of people who have to wait for half an hour to come onto the call to having 12, 15 people waiting in line, sometimes 3 hours just to be on this video call. And that was when I was like, okay,
Whoa.
I need to do this more often. I need to spread these people out. And that's when we moved to 3 times a week.
Wow.
Um, on average, I think we have 30 to 40 people who show up in one evening. Some stay for half an hour, some stay for 3 hours. And so it's a lot of movement. And right now, that's the main focus of it. It's creating online community and spaces where people are not just like Twitter, but in a more private setting, somewhat.
Okay. Do you,
Um,
do you feel like it's good for people's mental health to be on there and be able to talk with their peers?
Definitely. I think, as you said before, Twitter can be very scary,
Yeah.
especially early on, and especially when you're not quite sure yet. And so we have a lot of people who come to the Discord who haven't found a label for themselves or are just questioning and are like, I feel like I'm pretty sure I'm not cis, but that's all I know. And
Yeah.
so we have places for that. They can talk in the general channel, but we also have a specific place for people who are questioning, where they can talk about their anxieties and can talk about these things and have others who have been there and who feel better and safer and more settled in their identity now talk to them and talk them through these things. And it's a space where you can post a selfie that is not gonna get retweeted by fetishists, and it's a place where you can post a selfie and where your family's not gonna find it.
Okay.
And so,
Well, and I just learned recently. You see, I'm 40 years old. I'm an old person. That there are such a thing as lists on Twitter,
mhm,
and so I was like, oh, I can make a list of my friends that are kind of human rights allies, but then I learned that there are also much more devious lists. The more I'm listening, I'm like, oh my lord, there's all sorts of craziness going on out here. But um, no, I just think it's an awesome thing what you're doing. And I have a question for you. It's a personal question, from me, not related to Transpeer Network, but I'm hoping that you might be able to give me some guidance. When I first reached out to you, I don't know if that was a year ago, whenever that was. I
I want to say
was
November.
was in November. Okay. I was I was sure that I was um, coming out of my egg, I guess, so to speak, as a trans woman.
Mhm.
And since then, I have not been able to go see the specialist because of COVID,
Mhm.
wonderful COVID. I'm learning that there are certain aspects of my masculinity that I'm actually quite comfortable with. You know, I don't mind the way my face looks. I like having this weird little, my mother hates it, this little patch of hair right there because it hides the chin underneath. I don't mind that. I don't mind that my I'm nearly bald and I have to shave my head. I don't mind those things.
Mhm.
But there's also a very, very big part of me that wants to embrace a lot more feminine aesthetic. And I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around what that means. And so I've started to just say gender queer because it, to me it's like, okay, I really don't know what the hell is going on. So I guess you can all be confused as well. But it's something it's just a really confusing thing, and I'm gonna cry talking about it because whenever I talk about this stuff, I end up crying because I'm silly. But is that something that in your experience people experience, that people go through this strange fluidity?
Um, Definitely. I think so I had two different thoughts while you were talking about this. The first one is one thing that I try to, whenever people write me DMs like this. Oh. um, it like the way that you reach out to me. I have a lot of people reaching out to me, mostly people who are pretty early on in exploring their gender identity or what that means or what's going on. And one of the things that I always say is that you don't really need to know where you want to end up, right? Like you know where you are kind of, and you can figure out what orientation works for you, what direction feels good. And then you can take one step and then you can stop and you can think about it again and you can think, okay, what's the next direction? Where do I want to go? And you don't need to know where you're going to end up, as long you just can focus on what makes me feel good right now. What can I change about myself, about the way I present, the way others see me, the way others think of me, that makes me feel better. And then you can try that out. And if that works for you, that's great. And if it doesn't, then you take a step back. And I think
That is that is not how I was raised at all. Oh my goodness. My gosh, it's totally the opposite.
because this is overwhelming. Like
Yeah.
we grow up in an environment where we are told this is what you are, and you don't have to think about it. Don't worry about it. This is just how you were born. And the moment you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm gonna drop this, suddenly there's so much coming towards you, and there's so many questions, and there's so many things you need to figure out, or you want to figure out, or you feel insecure about. And we're so used to having clear answers to that we keep trying to find a new clear answer immediately and be like, okay, so I'm not cis, but what does that mean? And then I need to find a label and a identity for myself. And it's really hard to give yourself the space to grow into that and to grow into that person that you really want to be or that you really are. And you would never tell a 8-year-old that you need to know what your job's gonna be. Like, right? Like you would never expect a kid to know where they're going to be in 20 years. Why do you expect yourself to know immediately where you're going to end up or what you're going to be comfortable with without being able to try things out and without being able to take this step by step?
Well, I think that, well, part of it is that having a label, a labeled identity or sexuality, I mean, uh, to me that feels like it would give me a little bit of security, but maybe that's maybe that's not the case because because I don't know. For a few months there, I just like, you know what? I'm gonna put all this gender shit. I'm just gonna tuck it away. I'm not even gonna think about it because, I don't want to stress my wife out or I don't want to stress my kids out. And then as soon as I start thinking about it, the tears come and the real emotions come, and I'm like, okay, so I know that this is something that really needs to be dealt with. But I never really thought of it as you can do it just a little bit at a time, because what if I make a mistake and it's not right? Do I just kind of start over or go in a different direction? Is that okay? I mean, I don't know.
I think it is. I think, yeah, like we all try different things. Everybody does different presentation stuff. Like if you look at, and like, I don't know, for me, I very much like conceptualizing this as second puberty. Especially if you're taking hormones, it literally kind of works like that. But even without that, it's still one of those phases in your life where you get to kind of figure out who you are. And I don't know about your first puberty or your teenage years, but I know that I tried a lot of different things and most of them did not work. And that's okay. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's okay.
We don't want to go back to those first puberty years.
Exactly. But I think that's pretty natural. And I think there's a reason why all of us have this shared experience of awkward teenage years where we tried to be a person and then realized that didn't fit. And then we tried a different kind of person. And yeah, I think it's hard to do that when you're an adult with adult responsibilities. And it's hard to do that when people outside of your inner circle expect you to be this fully formed person. But I sure as hell wasn't until I figured these things out. And I'm still figuring out what exactly that means for me now. And I'm sure I'm going to keep doing that for a while.
Well, hopefully I can keep doing that. I mean, I am old, but I see a lot of people online that are still figuring out things, well into their 60s and 70s, and however long it takes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's hope. So there's that. No, it's talking about gender identities. Because when I first met you on Twitter, I know that your pronouns were she, her, and now you use they, them pronouns, and you identify as trans and non-binary, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about that change for you and how that occurred? Because that's kind of similar to what we were just talking about, how things can change a little bit.
Sure. I actually just tweeted about that a couple of days ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I don't expect people to read my stuff. It's fine. No, but basically the way I explained it there, and then I'm going to go more into detail, is that when I realized I was non-binary, I took steps, or like it's not that I was like, oh, I'm going to go back to presenting more male or feeling more masculine or anything like that. For me, it was more of this doesn't quite fit yet. Let's take a sharp left turn and just go towards a different direction. So for me, this only started once I was being perceived consistently as a woman. And so I had the experience of like a year and a half of the main goal in my life was, I want to be gender corrected by strangers. I want to walk around and people look at me and they just see a woman. And that's going to be great. And it is. And it is much better for me personally than people gendering me as male or people thinking of me as a man, because I'm very much not that. But once I got there and once I got to the point where I would spend time in environments where people would just assume that I was a cis woman and people would just interact with me that way, I realized that while that was better than what I had before, I still wasn't quite satisfied and it still felt kind of restrictive, again, in a different way, but still. And so that's when I was like, okay, so maybe I don't need to do any of that. Maybe I don't have to have like this this monolithic cultural understanding of this is the group that I belong to. And that's when I kind of just said, you know what, fuck it. I don't need any of those things. And I honestly don't know how to explain my gender identity other than fuck it. I'm sorry, can I swear on this podcast? Because if I need to
we're swearing, so
if I need to explain my identity, I need to. I'm not used to that being I realize that that's more of a North American question to even ask. And so I keep having to remind myself that it's not the same as in Europe.
You just swear all the time in Europe?
More so than here, I think, yes.
Oh, well, I swear a lot, so it's all good.
Awesome. And so I've gotten to the point now where I want people on the street who need to put me into one of two boxes to go with she, her, just because it fits better than he, him. But outside of that, I don't really care. I don't feel like there's a specific identity I have to explain to people. If people are confused, that's great. Stay confused. If people look at me and they have no idea where to put me, that's fantastic, because I don't really feel like I want to be put into any of the pre-made boxes, and I just do my own thing. And when I feel like bleaching half of my hair and cutting it down to a side cut, then I'll just do that. And sometimes
And
I
it's
put on a lot of makeup and present in a very femme way, and then sometimes I don't feel like doing that at all. And yeah,
that's fantastic. I love it that your box is fuck it. I
exactly.
like it. That's a good box. Well, and kind of, when I think of me and what I want people to see me as, I just want to be queer. I don't know that I want people to ever see me as a woman. I just want them to say, well, there's something strange about Jay. We don't know what it is. And that's okay. I might come out with like a sequined suit coat someday and just walk around and be like, okay, people. Well, what do you have? A good friend of mine, V, who is also genderqueer, they told me a story about how one time they were walking across a parking lot out of a bar, going over to their hotel, something like that. And they passed these two young boys, and the boys, they could hear them talking about, is that a man or is that a woman? Wondering whether or not they should go talk to them. And they were just saying how it was the coolest feeling. And I really didn't get it at the time when they were telling me, but now it's like, oh, that makes sense, because what they don't have to know. We don't owe it to anyone to present in any way at all,
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely. That's an experience I've made lately as well, where, especially since right now my profile says they, them, non-binary, trans. That's it. So I don't actually refer to any. I say it's not a woman just because I keep getting called a woman and it's annoying. But
but do you now? I was going to ask you. Do you think that's because people are used to your old pronouns, or do you think it's because they're clocking you as a woman, and that's why they're saying that? What do you think it is that?
depends on the people. I think
Yeah.
people who know me from before are just used to me with she, her pronouns and as identifying as a woman, and then new people who find me um, just look at my aesthetic or look at how I look or how I dress, and then take it from there, take the name. Um, the interesting thing that has lately happened is that a lot of non-binary people approach me, and it's a pretty big toss-up whether they assume that I was assigned female or male at birth. And so I have a lot of people where I'm like, by the way, you misunderstand. Like I have people who were assigned female at birth who are non-binary who are coming out and who are like, I have the same experience as you have. Can you help me with this? And I always have to be like, I took an extra turn. I'm approaching it from the same direction you are now, but that's not where I started. And so I kind of have to
That's kind of amazing, though.
out myself that way. And it's really
I mean,
nice to,
yeah.
yes, to be in that place where people can't tell or where people are unsure. That's exactly where I want to be. And when I first experienced that, I was an incredible like euphoria, I guess. Non-binary gender euphoria, I guess.
That's awesome. That's so freaking cool.
So I'm a big fan of that confusion.
That's cool. Well, and the whole idea of aesthetic is really kind of interesting. I was speaking to a friend, Georgie Williams, on this show a few weeks back, and unfortunately, this was after the recording ended that we just kept talking, and we started talking about attraction because um, I have I had always considered myself straight. I was attracted to women. I'm in a monogamous relationship with a cis woman, and I'm very very happy. But the more I learn about my gender identity and my sexuality and in listening to other people, the more I find that it's actually the more femme aesthetic that I'm attracted to. Not necessarily. Sorry, I've got something ringing on my Computer, stop ringing. Hopefully you guys couldn't hear that. But anyhow, it's more the feminine aesthetic that I'm attracted to. So, non-binary people or men that like to present that feminine aesthetic are very attractive to me. And it's like, wow, it kind of it kind of blew away a line
Mhm.
that maybe never should have been there to begin with. And it's like, is everything fuzzy and blurry like this? Are all these lines just movable? Is it all bullshit? Can we actually be whoever we want to be and be attracted to whoever we want to be? It's like, this is not the society that I
Mhm.
think most of us are raised in. But I think that, and I've said this before, but I think that the queer community, aside from being a little bit vicious on Twitter at times,
That's just
is
Twitter.
it's just Twitter is so much more varied, open, accepting, and loving
Mhm.
than any community I've experienced in my life. And I'm talking about my family that I grew up with. I mean, it's like, and I know that we are very, very privileged now to not have been at the forefront of the fighting for rights and the ability to even live and be queer. But I'll tell you what, I feel like this is an age where, as long as people have the right resources, they can really start to thrive.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think? I mean, I have I have a very big queer family. I mean, two of my four kids, or three of my four kids, identify as queer in some way, and they're happy. They don't feel like they have to hide it. They don't feel shame like I would have in my childhood. And it's like, this is a whole different world now. Um,
Definitely.
yeah.
Um, I
Sorry, I kind of
actually
rambled on a little bit there.
no. Funnily enough, I just talked about this maybe a week ago to Kiri, actually, now that you've already mentioned her. Um, we were talking about shame, and I talked about how I, in my generation or with my peers or with other like people somewhere between, I guess, 25 and 30, if you want to be super precise, it's still a very common thing for people to have grown up in a lot of shame and have a lot of internalized shame about their queerness, about being trans, about being gay, about all of these things. And I never really had that. I didn't really know I was queer until pretty late. So the first time I kind of figured that I might be trans was when I was 23, and the first time I like realized that I was attracted to men was when I was 17, 16. Um, but I never internalized that shame. I never lived. I mean, in my family, it was always like, there's not no other queer people, like openly queer people in my family. I don't know of anybody in my family who's queer. Statistically, that's very unlikely because I have a big family, but they haven't come out. But it was still something that was always just like, yeah, this is just normal. Like, people are gay, people are trans. It was never something that I was taught to be ashamed of. And so I can feel that even today, where I never had that and I never had to unlearn that. And I think that more and more kids, or like the later you were born, I guess, the higher your chances are of having that experience of just being like, it was scary for me to figure out, but not because I was ashamed of it or because I thought others would shame me for it. That was never my consideration. And I only recently realized how rare that is with people my age.
I I love my talks with Kiri. She's sometimes too deep for me, because she has a very she just has such a good grip on so many concepts that are just loose thoughts in my mind, and so coming away from talking to her is really kind of a special experience, isn't it?
Like,
It
oh,
really is.
definitely.
It really is. Well, that's wonderful. That really is. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me, Laura. It's been great to chat with you.
You too. I'm glad we finally made this happen. I was
Me
looking
too.
forward to this for a while.
Me too. Me too. And thank you so much to anyone who is watching or listening. And if you like the show, tell your friends, share it around. You can subscribe to it. There's a lot of great episodes on there now, and I'm working hard to produce more for you to get you through the quarantine. So take care, everybody. Stay safe and stay strong.
Bye.
I'd like to once again thank our sponsor, Rebecca Jonesy, author of the Mabs Doll series, where the Fae know that everyone is unique and all love is valid. Thank you so much for helping to make this show possible.